A too private secret wears you out. A shared secret nourishes you. This is Jung. This is the spirit that guides me today to talk to you about this topic. The wall that leads to the second frame of Purgatory, in Dante's Divine Comedy, is compared by the poet to the stairs that on the side of the mountain beyond the Arno River climbs from the center of Florence to Mons Florentinus, Mons Regis, or in ancient times, Monticulus, the Mount of Florence on which stands the Basilica of San Miniato al Monte. Among the masterpieces of Romantic architecture, and according to scholar of symbolism Fred Gettings, Dante's most beloved church, the Basilica witnesses to a special Christian assimilation of pre-existing astrological symbolism, and it celebrated its millennium in 2018, although its history dates back even more anciently to the burial of the Armenian saint Minias of Florence. Although the various councils of the early centuries, Laodicea, Toledo, Braga, anathemas were pronounced against astrology, it was too deeply rooted in universal beliefs for it to be really eradicated. So the idea of Saint Thomas Aquinas, according to which even in the character conditioning produced by the planets, the will of man remains free, astra inclinant non necessitant, resulted in the medieval compromise, also accepted by Dante, that the stars can indicate the destiny, although without determining it. Art and sacred architecture have often absorbed astrological symbolism, adopting the bestiary of the zodiac as icons of the passage of time, or sometimes of Christian theological foundations. The zodiac of San Miniato al Monte, visible in the third panel of the marble carpet of the central nave, represents a real philosophical machine of the most arcane astrology, linked to daily rites ruled by the sign of Taurus, annual, presided by Pisces, and epochal, connected with the date of the foundation of the Basilica, May 28, 1207. Perhaps in the salvific expectation, waiting of an age of the spirit, supervised by Aquarius, of course, and joined in a very punctual way with the symbols inside the Basilica and outside the church. The right-hand orientation of the zodiac, almost without comparisons with other contemporary models, and the particular representation of its glyphs, the geological peculiarity of the place, and the positioning of the building, its development on 3 levels, crypt underworld, pedicross earth, and apse heaven, and its golden proportions, which can be traced back to that Platonic conception of God as mundi elegans architectus, the elegant architect of the world, inspired by Plato's Timaeus and resumed by the school of Chartres. The hybridization of Islamic and Christian art, the theriomorphic sculptures, and the very occult inscriptions give to San Miniato an exceptionally esoteric character. As scholar Franco Pratesi has pointed out, everything makes us strongly feel the presence of men in this basilica, a living and real humanity, not to be opposite, but to be juxtaposed to mysticism. In this basilica, that is a human being with a capital B, is not only a spectator, as in the other Romanic churches, but also an actor. According to Fred Gettings, San Miniato al Monte represents a state of being, a mental state, in which the human being is placed between two worlds. And therefore, this is important, not an intermediate point like the normal churches, but a point of access to somewhere else. For these reasons, it requires to be approached with a holistic mental attitude that in medieval age was called contemplative. After visiting San Miniato al Monte, the English writer John Ruskin admitted, "For the first time ever, I understood what the builders of the Middle Ages have been and what they had meant." In the early 70s, the art historian, astrologer, and esotericist Fred Gettings, also known by the pseudonyms of Mark Hetzel or David Oveson, author of many occult bestsellers around the world, came to Florence, and in the presence of the golden mosaic in the apse of San Miniato al Monte depicting Christ Pantocrator, had an experience intensely spiritual, the most profoundly aesthetic and arcane of all his life. A tremendous excitement of the soul in the form of a Platonic anamnesis. I remember who I am. Felt by him as a call to decipher the secret symbolism of the Basilica. Such a complex symbolism, this is my hypothesis, which I proposed in a paper published a couple of weeks ago, and that will come out in a bilingual book in some months. Such complex symbolism seems to tell us about the millenarian anguish of the medieval man associated with the advent of the Antichrist. At the end of an age of the world, astrologically, in Jung's words, the commissure, or the moment of transition from the first to the second fish in the astrological sign of Pisces, along the well-known movement of precession of the equinoxes, which is the main topic of Jung's Ion. But also his eschatological hopes for the beginning of a new time, a new cosmic time filled with grace and serenity, as foreseen by apocalyptic medieval mystic Joachim of Fiore, as the age of the Holy Spirit, vaticinated by occultists such as Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner, the age of Aquarius, and from a psychological point of view, echoed by Carl Gustav Jung himself. Firstly, in his Liber Novus, or a book, The Way of What Is to Come, and then almost 40 years later, in Ion, researches into the phenomenology of the self, the idea of a new eon of psychology. As documented by geographer gnomonist, so sundial maker, Simone Bartolini, who discovered one secret of San Miniato al Monte just 10 years ago. It's incredible. For hundreds of years, no one was aware of that secret. Still today, for about 6 days in the period of the summer solstice, June 21st, and for a few minutes, around 12:36 solar time, A small ray of light enters from the third lancet window, starting from the entrance on the southwest wall of the Basilica, and announcing the beginning of the summer, illuminates the sign of Cancer in the zodiac of inlaid marbles, exactly on the axis of the building. The luminous disk, initially a few centimeters, progressively widens, finally filling almost entirely the marble circumference of about 36 centimeters, on which, like a target, the glyph of Cancer is inscribed. The sun rays that filter from the other single lancet windows of the southern wall make the play of light further articulated. A first luminous circle appears at 1:50 p.m. on the marble carpet at the foot of the high altar ciborium. After about 2 minutes, another circle lights up at the center of the nave, in the direction of the entrance, about 6 meters from the previous one. At 1:53 p.m., a third circle intercepts the marble zodiac, falling exactly, as we said, on the Cancer glyph. 2 other circles at a temporal distance of 3 minutes appear again on this ideal axis, so to create a luminous path of 5 spheres that seems to guide us from the apse to the main entrance. As scholar Bartolini points out, light, which has always been a vehicle for the manifestation of God and the divine, runs through the entire nave, as if God himself wanted to come out from inside the temple to meet men. This phenomenon, once coinciding with the celebrations of the patron saint of Florence, Saint John the Baptist, makes the zodiac of San Miniato al Monte the oldest monumental solstitial sundial still working in the world after more than 1,000 years. In this complex of architectural and iconographic symbolism, which would take hours and hours to be explored and understood, I would like today to bring your attention to a specific detail. Don't you notice something strange in the glyph of Pisces? I don't know if there is someone from the sign of Pisces in the room. Yes. There are 2 mistakes, 2 errors in this glyph. It is not a normal Pisces glyph. No suggestions, observations? Yes, perfect. 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 Jung noticed that. Jung saw everything, also this. Not in San Miniato, but in others similar representations. And the second mistake? Perfect. Perfect. The 2 fishes miss the little silver thread, the nodus celestis, that series of weak stars connecting astronomically the 2 parts of the constellation. It is in fact above all the glyph of Pisces in the 4th zodiac, radically departing from the ancient and modern astrological tradition that further contributes to the mystical atmosphere of the Basilica. The species, in fact, completely ignore medieval symbolism. It does not unite them from the mouth, as the canon would have it, any silver thread, nor they are positioned in opposite directions to identify, for example, in Lamb Spring's ancient alchemical code, the relationship between spirit and soul, or between soul and form. In addition to that, Pisces has the same direction. So the last sign of the zodiac that concludes and reopens the eternal cosmic cycle symbol of a Christic resurrection to which the internal and the external iconography of the Basilica seems to tend, Pisces point out to dissolution and rebirth at the same time. In this case, however, a rebirth that is no longer cyclical. Christ's victory over death is, in fact, eschatological historicization, an exit from the cyclical time of the Greek conception and an entrance into Christian linear time, like the path of the Divine Comedy, which takes place in Jesus. But the 12th glyph could suggest also a rebirth, a different kind of rebirth. And I'm referring, Romano, to Jung's lecture on rebirth, in the form of a projectio, using the alchemical term, projection of the corpus glorificationis, the subtle body, which, Jung writes, passed to a state of incorruptibility, no longer transient, separates itself from the material body. We are in front of one of the highest and deepest representation of rebirth that in his 1939 Eranos lecture, Jung expressed as follows: "This is my transformation, not my own personal transformation, but the transformation of that which is immortal in me, which frees itself from the mortal shell that I am, and which, awakened in a certain sense to a life of its own, ascends the boat of the sun, taking me, perhaps, with it." How terrible is this place? This is indeed the house of God. This is the gate of heaven, said Jacob on the stone of Bethel, Genesis 28:1. The holy door of San Miniato al Monte facing east, built and never to be opened, on the model of the Temple of Jerusalem, warns the believers that they are entering a place that it is not only a passage to heaven, but already belongs to heaven. Second part. In the second panel of the floor of the nave, there is a floor inscription in 3 leonine hexameters, which, with reference to the eschatological mystery enclosed in the zodiac symbolism, has been welcoming the believers and visitors to San Miniato al Monte for over 1,000 years. The inscription, difficult to interpret even in medieval Latin, would literally return the following meaning: in front of these doors, by the grace of the heavenly God, hic valvis ante celesti numine Dante, metricus est judex, so poet and judge, hoc feci condere Joseph. This Joseph did. Ergo rogo Christum, therefore I pray Christ, quod semper vivat in ipsum, may always live in him. It has been suggested that Joseph is the name of the then abbot of San Miniato al Monte, although this has been questioned by historiographical research. So his identity, therefore, still remains shrouded in a mystery. The final section of the 3 lines, which, depending on the last word with the 3 diacritical macrons of abbreviation, the little line on the last word, temporemque, which doesn't mean anything, literally. So, on the basis of how we interpret that word, we can have three different translations of the last part. The preceding verses save from time and from death, or the preceding verses endure from time and death, or again, more correctly, from a grammatical point of view, these preceding verses save from time the mountain. So the mountain is outside time. In relation to the marble zodiac, 1207 is in fact the year of its completion, the number on the first line of the last section. The translation has been rendered more entirely as follows. Here, before the doors placing the heavenly law, the zodiac, this did Joseph build, master and knower of the sacred numbers. Therefore, I pray Christ may ever live in him. 1207, these inscriptions preserve from time and death, or save this mountain from time. Regardless of the various translation hypotheses, the unconventional choice of words and syntax seems to suggest the intention of the author to hide an occult meaning. Through the logogryph, which is an incomplete anagram, which forms words of various length using only some letters of the original sentence, it is in fact possible to obtain in almost every hemistich the name of a planet. Luna, Mercurius, Saturnus, and so on. Further logogryphs, this is still Fred Getting's research, not mine yet. Further logogryphs allow us to grasp more fully the epochal significance of the inscription. On the fifth day before the calends of June 1207, which is May 28, 1207, the building site of San Miniato al Monte was closed. And at dawn was ceremonially installed the marble zodiac. The astrological significance of the date seems confirmed by the further logogryphs, where the term horoscopus indicates in the medieval astrology the ascendant, that is the sign of the zodiac or constellation rising on the eastern horizon at a certain time. Ortus refers to dawn, and Taurus, therefore, recall Taurus as ascendant. Monte is, of course, the mountain where the Basilica rises. So the preceding logogryphs would give form to the following sentence. On May 28, 1207, Taurus was the ascending constellation at dawn in San Miniato al Monte. Why this date is so particular? As esotericist Fred Gettings has noted, the ephemerides of May 28, 1207, tell us that on that day there was an accumulation of as many as 5 planets in the sign of Taurus. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Saturn, the name that we find in the logogryphs. It was an exceptional planetary phenomenon called in antiquity stellium, or today stellium, repeatable only after thousands of years. Gettings' analysis ends with a fascinating interpretation, which brings us finally, but still slowly, to Jung's Red Book. Gettings connects the marble inscription to the 13th century pessimism of Italian mystic Joachim of Fiore, a mystic to which some of the speakers here dedicated unforgettable pages, such as Romano Màdera, Lance Owens, Christine Maillard, and Paul Bishop. Placed by Dante in the second crown of wise spirits in the sky of the sun, Joachim of Fiore was convinced of the coming of the Antichrist in the early years of the century, prophesying the end of an era of the world by 1260, so about 50 years after the building, the setting up of the zodiac of San Miniato. Joachim Fiore had theorized a succession of 3 ages of earthly history, each lasting, keep the number in mind, 42 generations. 42. The age of the Father and the Old Testament, astrologically corresponding to the so-called age of Aries, whose overcoming of the previous age of Taurus we would find symbolized in the destruction of the golden calf by Moses in the Bible, the age of Sun, represented by the Gospel and the advent of Jesus, the age of Pisces, and the age of the Holy Spirit. From 1260, the beginning of Revelation, to the end of the sabbatical millennium, the age of Aquarius. This third and final age, perhaps predicted in the Gospels themselves, the Christic exhortation to follow, literally, Luke, the man carrying a pitcher of water, that sometimes was interpreted as a prefiguration of the age of the Aquarius. Would have been anticipated by persecutions and calamities, corresponding in fact astrologically to the advent of the time of the second fish, that of the Antichrist. You see the writing, the 2 parts of the Pisces constellations, the Nodus Celestis, silver thread connecting the 2 Pisces, one vertical and the other one horizontal, Christ and Antichrist, north and south, and the age of the Spirit beginning in the middle of the commissure, as Jung noted. Jung writes, the passage that would take place from the Christian aeon to that of the Holy Spirit was called by Joachim of Fiore Evangelium Aeternum, the eternal gospel. And this is a time when the great division of opposites has just begun. This vision seems to have been granted by a divine grace as a kind of consolamentum, so that in the age of darkness, man does not abandon himself to a total despair. But Joachim supposes, in a psychologically correct way, that a new status, or we would say a new attitude, manifests itself first as a more or less latent stage of preparation, which is followed only later by a fructificatio, the flower and the fruit. At the time of Joachim and of the building site of San Miniato al Monte, this fructificatio still did not exist. So humanity could have been in despair. Joachim of Fiore was a kind of Padre Pio of those times, but so well known everywhere. So his prophecy could have been taken very, very seriously. In about 50 years, the world could end. According to Joachim, the world would have lasted a total of 126 generations. Well, notes Gettings, the San Miniato inscription develops on 3 lines for a total of 129 letters. But if we eliminate from the word teporemte the 3 letters with the macron on the top, we find 126. 6 letters, 3 times 42. 42 generation, 42 and 42. So Getting's hypothesis is that Joachim of Fiore was present in the thoughts of who built that basilica. I was not sure about that, so it is too simple. So I wanted to test Getting's hypothesis, and because, of course, it was fascinating. A mystic so important for Jung at the ground also of the building of San Miniato. I was able to find a medieval technique, the method of arithmomancy, according to a Chaldean sub-method, which associates Latin letters to a numerical value between 1 and 8 through a simplified correlation with the corresponding Hebrew letters. That led me to a really surprising discovery. So the total numerical value is another time a multiplication of 42. 518, taking out always these 3 strange letters. So 504 without the 3 letters, 42 at the end. I made another interesting discovery, calculating the numbers of the candlesticks depicted on the different levels of the basilica. Strange numbers. Nobody knew the meaning. So 7, then 8, then 6. Okay. But it was very difficult reaching this result. It was a kind of mystical experience with me, a physical experience. The first calculation is static. So a number corresponds to a letter. In this case, I had to imagine, but it came out spontaneously, the church is a living body with 2 breaths. Inspiration, expiration. The axis of the basilica is connected by 2 zodiacal signs. This is very particular. Normal Romanic churches are not oriented in this way. Cancer towards the altar, Capricorn toward the entrance. Cancer, what is? Extroversion, coming out. The word, the door of Cancer in Platonic theory is the door, the human door from which souls come into this world. The door of Capricorn is the door from which souls go away, go back home to God. So Cancer is multiplication, Capricorn is division. 6 multiplicating 8, 7, 8, 2,688, dividing Capricorn, 8, 8, 42. Okay, it's enough. Joachim Fiore was there. So the prayer to Christ in the last line, Ergo rogo Christum, quod semper viva ipsum, would ultimately assume a further and decisive meaning. The hope of countering apotropically with the installation of a solstitial zodiac under the protection of the sign of Taurus, Christ, Logos, at the beginning of an age of the world, in Jung's view, the time of the second fish, in an anticipation of a future age of the Holy Spirit or the age of Aquarius, the millenarian prophecy of the coming of the Antichrist, which, according to Jung, is not a mere prophetic prediction, but an inexorable psychological law. whose arrival at the end of time is symbolized, as we have seen, by the door of man and the southern fish in the traditional glyph of fish. But in the zodiac of San Miniato al Monte, the southern fish is directed towards the north, the door of heaven. The Basilica of San Miniato al Monte will last forever, and with it the certainty of the presence of Christ at the side of man in secula seculorum forever. A few minutes and then I conclude. As third and last part, as Romano Màdera pointed out, Jung felt that he was entrusted with the task of looking ahead and talking about things that will be. And Joachim of Fiore becomes, in this sense, a prophetic figure with whom he identifies. In the wake of Joachim, already present in Jung's thought in the years of the drafting of the Black Books, then the Red Book, Jung makes himself a prophet of that age of spirit, corresponding perhaps to the Aeon of Aquarius, that stands as the definitive landing place after the age of the Father, Old Testament, Aeon of Aries, in the age of the Sun, New Testament, Aeon of Pisces. That dawn of a new era, which Nancy Furlotti yesterday referred to in a so profound and illuminating way, the dawn of a new era. In any case, Peter Kingsley clarifies, always Jung would emphasize that the future is totally alien and incomprehensible to us in the present. Any life and earth and new humanity will be so completely different in the age of Aquarius, in the age of the spirit, in Joachim's words, that it is a waste of time to speculate about them in our old dying age. He explained how one aeon always provides the seeds and the set bed for the aeon to come. What the seeds planted out will sprout into is none of our business to be sticking our noses into. It is none of our concern. That is still Peter Kingsley. To fantasize about a new world or a new humanity hundreds of years away is utter futility, because the only thing worthy of us as conscious humans is to confront with all our strength and honesty our own present, along with its immediate future. Perhaps this could be also the attitude that we should maintain in regards to the most important prophecy of our time, that of Fatima. In May, about 20 years ago, Pope John Paul II, on the occasion of Jacinta and Francisco's beatification, divulged the contents of the third and last secret, more precisely the third part of the same secret, which also mentions two angels, each with a crystal aspersorium in his hand, perhaps an Aquarian symbol, in which they gathered up the blood of the martyrs and with it sprinkled the souls that were making their way to God. In May 2010, Pope Benedict XVI, celebrating Mass on the Esplanade in front of a Marian shrine in presence of about 500,000 believers, declared, "Those who think that the prophetic mission of Fatima has ended would be deluded." 1 month ago, in March 2022, Pope Francis consecrated Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, fulfilling one of the prophecies of Fatima of 1917. Come back to Ascona, to Casa Gabriella, at the end of the journey, in our breakfast room that you will see tomorrow if you join the guided visit, where in the quiet and silent atmosphere of the old Casa Gabriella, there has been an old photograph of Professor Jung. On this photograph, which for decades has welcomed scholars, visitors, and men and women in search for themselves, Mrs. Olga Fröbe-Kaptein pasted a print of a quotation from her friend and mentor. We cannot know anything about the ultimate things, and only when we recognize this, we find our equilibrium again. Thank you very much for your attention.